Hi, my name is Rudi Magi and I am a human at JGF. Hi, ich bin Rudi Magi und ein Mensch der JGF.
Ifikile imini enkulu. Welcome to the Humans of JGF, a JGF holiday special highlighting the brilliant minds behind our vision. And today we have a special guest with us. I mean, anyone who knows my guest will associate this individual with nothing less than pockets full of sunshine. The one and only Rudi. How are you?
Happy Monday. I'm well, thanks, and yourself.
Good, thank you. Good, thank you. Rudi, when looking at how it is that you interact with the team and you just show up in your full personality, Rudi has the signature happy Monday, happy Tuesday, happy Wednesday. And I remember once we were unpacking the roots of it, where it came from. Please, would you share with our guests where that sense of joy and having to share it loudly and proudly with those around you?
So there are so many layers to this question,
Sure.
right? So many layers. So in my first year of teaching, I was at a point where I was extremely burned out. It was term 3. It was hectic. We were gearing up to final exams, and I was just freaking out. And we were sent on this workshop to help with motivation. And so we went, and the speaker, the facilitator, said, why are we so looking forward to Friday and wishing our week away that there remains little to hope for and to be happy about within your week because you're just chasing Friday? Instead of that, get excited for Monday. The second layer of this is that life gets really dark, and life can be very dark, and it needs to be an active decision to find the happiness in that darkness. And so if you tell yourself it's a happy Monday, you take that energy into the day with you, and you feel good about yourself, about it being Monday, rather than saying, oh, I wish it were Friday, that sort of thing. There's always a reason to be happy every day.
So it's more of an intention more than it is a feeling, really, to step into the day full of energy, full of life.
And an affirmation. It's an affirmation saying that today is a happy day, and you shift your mindset into being happy and to being grateful for all the opportunities that this day has. You might not have it tomorrow, and so live to the fullest today. Make it happy. Make it the best day. Claim it. It is yours.
Yeah, I love that. Claim it. It is yours.
Yes.
I love that. Good people, Rudi is one of 2 teacher coaches that we have in our organization thus far. When thinking about the work that you do, Rudi, looking at you and Jade and the kind of efficacy, passion, and almost as if you've been doing this all your lives. It's incredible to watch. It's actually quite wild to think that you only joined the organization this year. When doing the work that you do in the day and age that we are in now, what can you say South African classrooms are gaining from the current cohort of teachers?
The innovation and the drive to change the South African ecosystem, or especially the South African education ecosystem, is really profound. I've seen the most range of lessons in the biggest range of contexts, and in each one of those situations these teachers step up to the challenge. They make sure to understand the context within which they teach, and they make sure to meet the learners at their level and where they require the most attention. I've seen some really cool lessons, and I feel that learners are lucky to have teachers who are not only passionate about their subject, but passionate about education and about how education can really play a role in the lives of these learners that they engage with.
Lovely, lovely. And before we get to the meat of what it is that you do and the journey that has led you to be this Rudi that we now understand and are in complete awe of, where are you from?
Where am I not from? Should be the actual question. So I was born and raised in Marikana in the northwest, and we lived in this tiny little German community called Korndal. And that's where I went to church and to school, but only until I was 9, which is when my mother passed away. From then, we moved around all over the country. I lived in Natal for a while. I then moved back to the northwest, went down to the Western Cape, and then came back to northwest. I also lived in Pretoria at a time. And so I went to 8 different schools all over the country. And so I'm from everywhere, and a bit of everywhere is within me.
Lovely, lovely, lovely. And when highlighting your journey of being in 8 different schools, how did that impact your perception and reality of the learning and teaching experience for you?
Well, I definitely think that being in so many schools is the main factor of why I became a teacher. It showed me how important teachers are, but it also really highlighted the power that one teacher can have on you. I'm specifically talking about my English teacher, Mrs. Spencer, who was the reason that I became a teacher, because she saw potential in me that other teachers wouldn't have. And in the same way, I've also seen the negative impact that a teacher can have on their learners, and why it's so important to recruit teachers into the system that are passionate about what they are doing and who want to drive change and use their education to drive that change in the learners that they teach. And oftentimes that's not the case. Some people go into education as a backup career, and you can tell as a learner that these teachers don't really want to teach you, and they don't really want to impact your life for the better. And so it prompted me to go into education and to be that teacher who sees the learners, and it's been quite a special road for me.
Lovely, lovely stuff. Rudi, do take us into the day-to-day workings of being a teacher coach at JGF.
All right, so it's a lot of fun. We start our day with stand-up, which is always a different prompt. Sometimes, however, we miss stand-up because we are in school visits. And so it's really about meeting the teacher where they're at and supporting them where they're at. And so every day is different. Every day comes with different challenges and different lessons that are observed. And so it's you need to be very agile and adaptable. And so it generally starts with, the school visit component of it generally starts with arriving at the school, meeting with the teacher, and then getting ready for the lesson observation. In the actual lesson observation, we become little flies on the wall. We're little flies on the wall. We have our notebook or computer. I find notebooks to be a bit less distracting than the sound of click, 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 click while you're teaching. And so after the lesson observation, I generally have a quick chat with the teacher, following which they complete what we call a classroom conversation or a lesson observation tool. This lesson observation tool is really focused around reflecting on the resources you used, reflecting on your lesson, reflecting on the way within which you instruct and give instruction to your learners. And then we have a conversation about that. And we look at that little snapshot of what we got in a lesson observation. And from there we look at ways in which that teacher can make micro improvements, because you can't go from 0 to 100% every day. I don't know if you've read Atomic Habits by James Clear. It's that whole 1,01 times 10 to the gosh, I'm not a mathematician. I'm really not a mathematician. But it's something like if you change your habits 1% at a time, over a year, you'll have become 37.78 times better than you were when you started at 1%. And so that's what it's really about. It's taking that snapshot, which is a 1%, and you look for a 1% improvement within that 1%, and that's how you systematically push your teachers, and you challenge them to become more and to become those expert teachers that we so desperately need.
So when looking at these teachers that you are walking with, essentially, what flashbacks do you have of your own experience of being in the classroom, and what are you bringing into this role that also speaks to the awareness that, you know what, when I was in the classroom, for sure I needed this. When I was in the classroom, I would have really appreciated this kind of advice. So what sort of flashbacks do you get as you are now the teacher coach?
So, in my first year of teaching, I had a learner that we became very good friends after a while, but she was very challenging. She was extremely challenging. She pushed the boundaries quite significantly in my classroom, and it had me feel completely helpless for about a term or two. I get these flashbacks around behavior the most because I see a learner acting out in a lesson observation, or with a reflection with a teacher. We would reflect, and they would highlight how there's this one learner. There's always this one learner that just pushes the buttons, and they know which buttons to push. And then you tap into your own experience, and my advice there was always to try and build a relationship with that learner and get to know them. It might be a cry for help, and it might be a situation where they're just not okay, and they're screaming, they're crying, they're like, hey, help me, see me, acknowledge my pain. These are teenagers we are working with, and so they're extremely sensitive. And I'm seeing this as a parent too, because yes, there's the teenager that I parent, but it's about understanding where the learner is at. And I've seen such great results in my NQTs when we then reflect further down the line, and it's like, hey, so I remember at the beginning of the year you were saying that there's this one learner that just drives you insane. How did you approach that? And when they express the relationship that was built with these learners, it is so beautiful to see, and it's infectious, and you see their energy is changing, and they are more enthusiastic about the learners with whom they're engaging.
Yeah. And now tell me of your earliest memory of being in the classroom. Now you just had a flashback when you were dealing with learners in your classroom. Now be the learner and give us a little snapshot of your earliest memory.
That would have been grade 1. My grade 1 teacher was Fräulein Skriber. I went to a school called die Deutsche Schule Krondal, which is a German school in Krondal. Yeah. And she taught us how to brush our teeth. And she took a comb, and it was actually quite brilliant in hindsight. And I used this when I was working in the special needs classroom when teaching how to brush teeth. And so I learned a bit of pedagogy from her, I suppose. So she wove wool through a comb, and then she just brushed across it and showed us how it doesn't really work and how you need to go around and around and around and around. She was this ancient teacher. She was ancient. She was probably around 70, and it was quite fun.
And what kind of learner were you?
So in as many schools that I went to, at some point I started quite heavily rebelling against changing schools. I stopped trying to make friends, and so I ranged from, and I started out as being the good learner who does their work, and from there it became interesting, and I became the rebellious learner. I became the learner who would skip school and repeated a grade as a result of that. But I eventually stopped trying so hard, because in my mind I thought, okay, cool. And this was around school number 5. I realized that, hey, you're going to change schools again. So stick to yourself, keep your head down, read your books, be the loner, learn to make friends. And I learned that at a very young age because I had to. But at that stage, I became the disinterested learner who's very rebellious and breaks all the rules.
Yeah.
I was a monster. I feel so sorry for my teachers.
Take this opportunity, Rudi, to make a public announcement, a public apology on this here podcast to all the teachers that had to deal with you.
Girl soz.
You heard it live. Our first public apology on this here podcast.
Yes.
So at what point, Rudi, did you get from being a rebellious learner to being the person that you are now? Because I'm not going to even make assumptions that maybe your behavior transformed. Did it transform by the time you matriculated? What was the journey there?
It started transforming. It started transforming towards the time that I matriculated. I was at Hermanus High School, and I repeated the year, and at that point my grandmother took me in. And had it not been for her, she told me my brain is too big to just drop out of school, and that I have to finish school, that I have to go to university. Even though we didn't have the financial means, it needs to happen. And having repeated the year, I felt like I was this really stupid person. And I in changing schools so many times, it went from a German school to an Afrikaans school to an English school. So the medium of instruction kept changing. And so that was quite confusing. However, in my second grade 11 year, I realized that, okay, cool, this is now a new opportunity. I was still a bit rebellious, and I was still a bit like on the non-well-behaved side. Yeah. But my gran really got me into... She forced me to do, I'm saying forced because it was forced. We had to do cross country, we had to sing in the choir, we had to take part actively in the school's extramural program. And as a result, she kept me too busy to get up to nonsense. And that's the point at which it started changing. However, the rebellion... I don't think if rebellion is the right word, really, because my rebellious nature still hasn't changed. I question authority. I question the way things are done, and question why things are done in a specific way if it hasn't worked for so long. I question these things, and so I think a part of me is still true to that rebellious nature. I grew through the hardship of it all, and I came out stronger. But it's because I realized that if I don't put in the effort, I'm not going to be that teacher that can make a change. And so my first year at university was wild. I was met with Shakespeare for the first time because I went to so many schools and in so many different mediums. I'd never done Shakespeare at school level. And so I got to university and realized, hey, okay, there's a lot more, and you need to work really, really hard if you want to finish this program. A big part of it was also to prove people wrong. Many people didn't think I would make it, and I mean, that's hard on anyone if someone's always like, yeah, you're not going to make it in life. You're not going to make it in life. So I was like, actually, let me prove you wrong, girl.
Right now.
And that's what I then did. And that's where the hard work really began. But the rebellious nature of who Rudi is going to stay intact. When I see someone being wronged, I will speak up about it because that is in my nature. And I've learned from a young age that if you don't speak up about something, it's not going to change. And so the only way that change is going to be driven is if we actively speak up about it.
So essentially, this rebellious nature manifests itself differently now in a Rudi who is self-aware, a Rudi who has met their passion, and a Rudi who's self-motivated and has tapped into their own agency.
Very that.
Very
Very
much
that.
that.
Yes.
So, who's your favorite teacher?
Who is my favorite teacher? Like ever?
Like ever, yeah.
Like ever. Mrs. Spencer. Mrs. Spencer. She's the reason that I became a teacher. I had her for my second grade 11 year, and she was my English teacher, and there was this big sports event. So my school was big on sports. Ill.
Not ill.
Okay, not ill, but I'm a bit too queer for the sports. I might break a nail.
No, I hear you.
Right?
I hear you.
And there was this big sporting event. I didn't go to it because, again, it was sports, and I wasn't really into that. And so most of the school went. There were a few outcasts who didn't. And the day after the sporting event, they only arrived back at the school at 1 a.m. And so everyone was exhausted. And I remember we did the poem called An Abandoned Bundle. And we did this the day before the sporting event happened, and then we had to do a recap the day after the sporting event. And the teacher said, "Hey, I'm exhausted. Who wants to teach?" And I was like, well, I know the poem very well, so let's. And then I taught. And then I taught. And I had so much fun. I had so much fun analyzing the poem. And before you knew it, the lesson was over, and it was fun, and the teacher kept me in. She was like, "You have to become a teacher." And I was like, "No, I want to be an actor." And she said, "You can act as a teacher." And I was like, "No, I want to be a psychologist." And she said, "You can psychologize as a teacher." And I was pushing against it for quite a while, and she kept saying, you need to teach. And I then got funding to become a teacher, and from there I realized that this is actually really cool, and it kept me in education ever since.
And speaking of your journey, so you received funding, you taught, and now there's a turning point where you meet JGF. How did that come about?
Okay. So after leaving the mainstream classroom, I went into autism for a while and worked with kids on the autism spectrum. And I wanted to start a school for learners on the autism spectrum. That fell through royally.
Okay.
And I found myself unemployed at the beginning of a school year. It's really difficult for a teacher to find employment at the beginning of a school year when all the posts are already finalized and stuff. And it was then when I realized, hey, maybe you need to learn a bit more how business works and how to build a business from the ground up. And I got this really cool opportunity in the higher education space at a company called Instill Education. Really loved it there. And one day my manager, Tom, came to me and he said, "Look, Rudi, there's this organization called the JGF Fellowship, and they are running a selection camp, which will take place in the Northwest at Lebone College. Would you like to sign up as an assessor?" And I was like, "Okay, tell me more about JGF Fellowship." And he said, "Well, it's an organization that does scholarships for teachers." And I was like, whoa, where was this when I was studying or trying to become a teacher and trying to find funding? So I was like, actually, I'm really interested. Send me. And then we had training. We had training at the University of Pretoria on the assessment center methodology. And I was like, okay, cool, this is interesting. And then we had an in-person selection camp in 2019. And it was honestly such a blast. And I remember coming home from that selection camp and telling my now husband, we were just engaged at the time, that, hey, I think I found the organization that I want to work for. And from there, I manifested it. I called it. I claimed it. I was like, the job for me will come around. And when it does, I will know that it is the job. And so this was in 2019. In 2020, I did the online assessment center and in 2021 as well. And then at the end of 2021, there was a position as a teacher coach. And so I was like, okay, this is interesting. And then I read the job description and I was like, okay, this is for me. And it is mine.
I love it. Love it. And now you have highlighted the various experiences that you've had prior to JGF. I would like for us to go in depth. So take us from matriculant Rudi, leaving the classroom. Where does Rudi go? What are the various things that Rudi does that contribute today to the person we experience you in the professional space?
Yo, what a loaded question. So Rudi came out of the closet in matric.
Okay.
And so Rudi flew out of the closet in matric.
Flew out of the closet.
They flew out of the closet with little cute wings, super gay wings, like fairy wing vibes. And so I went from zero to super queer in a heartbeat. And so that's a big part of the identity I assumed as a teacher. And so I was always openly gay, or openly queer. I was very open with my learners about it. They knew from the get-go that I identify as queer, and I would teach in dresses. So I went to university. I did my Bachelor in Education. I got really into the community service aspect of being in res, rag, that sort of things, outreach, and from there, I did my teaching pracs in Johannesburg. I thought, cool, I've never lived in Joburg before. I want to do a prac in Joburg so I can see how the schools there are. Maybe I like it. Maybe I'll live there at some point. And so I did my teaching prac at a school called Greenside High, where I then was employed as an English teacher right after my teaching prac. And I taught English and life orientation at Greenside. English grades 8 to 10 and life orientations grade 10 to matric. And there was a lot of impact that was made. I was very involved in the extramural side of things. Really enjoyed it. Really, really enjoyed it. It's a really cool school to teach at. Shout out Greenside. But then I realized learners are falling through the cracks, and it's because they have learning barriers and not because of this or the next thing. And I felt inadequately trained to address those learning barriers. I was a high school English teacher. I didn't specialize in remedial education or in special needs education. And because I was so young, I took it very personally. I took it personally that my learners are repeating the year because they didn't make it through English, which is required to pass a year, and it wasn't their fault. It wasn't anything that they could do about it. They didn't wake up one day and decide, I'm not going to do well at school. They want to do well, but the system doesn't necessarily cater for the neurospicy learner. Neurospicy. And so I was approached by a school that works with learners in the autism spectrum, and they said, hey, come. The worst thing that can happen is you don't like it and you go back into mainstream education, but come, you might enjoy it. And I fell in love. I fell in love with autism, and I fell in love with working with learners on the spectrum. From this school, I went to another organization that does applied behavior analysis, also with learners on the autism spectrum, but on a 1-on-1 versus a 8-on-1 ratio. And so that was really, really profound, and I learned a lot. And I learned that behavior is communication. And this leads back to that example that I gave earlier of this learner who just drove me out of the wall. She was trying to communicate that she's not okay. And so with that, I was very interested in the autism space, and I still am. It is still the dream to open up that vocational center for adults with autism to find employment and to do really cool things. And that then took me to instill focuses on teacher and school leadership development. And so it was my first taste of working with the teacher rather than working with a learner. And again, I'm not a mathematician, but the reasoning kind of made sense to me. Work with 30, 40 learners, and you touch the lives of 30 to 40 people. But work with 30 to 40 teachers,
Yes.
and you get to impact the lives of 30 to 40, and they're not only teaching 30 to 40 kids like at their schools, they're teaching thousands of children, and so you impact the lives of thousands by focusing on their teachers and making sure that their teachers have the skills and the practical skills of teaching, because it is an art. It is such an art, but also such a precise science.
Yes.
And so that blend to me was very appealing. COVID happened, and then I moved into the IT space, where I worked as a commercial administrator. Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting, very non-humanitarian.
Tell us more.
It was interesting. I learned a lot about legals and about like commercial running of businesses and financials and all of that. But I felt the impact wasn't being made. I could feel my mind deteriorating over time, because I'm not working in a space where I feel the impact that my work has on others, other than making a few already rich people richer. It didn't have a big impact on society and on communities, and so it was a very unhappy time for me professionally, and it really made me assess what I want from life and where I wanted to go. And it was that made me realize that, hey, working with people is great. Working with non-people and non-humans is kind of boring. It's not me. It's not giving.
Yeah. All right. And I'm quite interested in your experience of teaching neurospicy learners. What, obviously, the stark differences between a mainstream classroom and a neurospicy context? Where do these spaces meet that we are unaware of?
Another loaded question. The spaces don't meet enough. They don't meet enough. The curricula we teach to the severely spicy neurospicy learners are quite hectic, and so can I take a moment to re-answer that question?
Sure, please.
All right. So they don't meet as they should. The curricula are so far apart, because in the space where you work with severely neurospicy learners, you focus on functional academics. Can they make their bed? Can they feed themselves? Can they make themselves a cup of tea? And so I don't think there's enough collaboration between the mainstream sector and the special needs sector. There are lessons that we can take from the other, and there are ways in which schools can adopt a special needs school to aid in the facilitation of these skills, to do outreaches, to do community work with these learners, not necessarily for academic purposes, but to raise awareness of neurodivergence in communities, because in so many communities the awareness isn't there and the understanding isn't there, and so it becomes difficult to engage with these learners from a home perspective, because they don't understand what these learners want and what they need. The biggest overlap is understanding behavior, understanding what behavior communicates. That was a big overlap. And the skills I've picked up in the special needs space have been so directly applied in the mainstream space as well, in understanding what it is that a learner is trying to communicate to you when they are going through the most.
Yeah, so behavior really as a site of investigation, understanding your learner, ascertaining their needs, and not having these, at times, cumbersome expectations on a learner that may be going through the utmost. And now that you are at JGF, what has surprised you the most about the organization?
The lunch benefit.
Goodness.
I have a very unhealthy relationship with food. And when I started, it was like, yes, if you work for the office, you get lunch on us. I was like, yes, I can actually feed myself.
What an honest response.
That was for me the biggest culture shock. And whenever there's even a small work get together, the food is always on point.
Yes,
the food is always on point.
Shout out to Joanna.
Yes.
Pew, 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 pew. All right. And now, looking at your cohort of teachers, you are the hands, yours and Jade's are the hands that have caught our newly qualified teachers, molded, walking with you in quite intimate ways. And I would say no one is more privy to their growth more than you and Jade. What about our candidate fellows, now our fellows who are in the classroom, reassures you that South African classrooms are in safe hands?
It's just that whole vibe. They come with passion. These teachers are passionate and they want to change the world. What excited me the most was seeing a learner in deep rural Limpopo, in a school where there's nothing. There are no resources. There are like handwritten class rules up on the walls, no printer, no projectors, no nothing. And she taught. Again, I'm not a mathematician, but it was tessellation and rotation, and there's another one where it slides across a plane. And she did all of this with little pieces of paper. And traditionally, you'd expect a teacher to have like a smart presentation, for this to be automated and for it to move across when they just press a button. But this teacher didn't have any of these resources and had to make do with what she had available. And that math lesson was the most innovative thing that I've seen in a classroom to date.
Goodness me. And now, Rudi, after you, we have Carla, who is going to be interviewed. What is your fondest memory of Carla?
So Carla is my direct line manager. My fondest memory of Carla comes at it's quite a personal note. So we finalized the adoption of our 14-year-old earlier this year. And when the adoption order came through, I reread like through all the policies, and I was like, okay, cool. So once the adoption order gets awarded, we're eligible for a period of time for parental leave. And it was quite a busy time in the organization. We had just had summit. And I approached her and I said, hey, Carla, this is what's going on. Here's, we have the adoption order, and apparently I'm entitled leave. And she said, go on leave. If HR comes back and says, no, you can't, I'll fight for you. You're a queer person. And if any man, and I'm using air commas here, but if any male who becomes a parent, they get their leave, and so you as a queer male are also entitled for the same leave because you just became a legal parent. And it just really made me feel super held, and it made me feel seen. Carla does make you feel seen, and she makes you feel heard, and those are qualities that I haven't really experienced much before when looking at direct line managers. She listens, she hears, and it's not just like I'm hearing white noise. It's that active listening, and okay, cool. This is what I am seeing, and she always has this line: "The more I know, the more I can support you." And it really, she opens the door for knowing more. She wants to know and she wants to support, and that's been quite an interesting experience, but quite a beautiful one at that.
Sure. And as you know, our mantra as an organization is #BeATeacher. And there is someone, Rudi, who's listening to you, and they have this amber within wanting to be a teacher, but there's so many things that are getting in the way, be it that, the being underpaid, inverted commas, or not knowing where to start. Please share words of encouragement that would fan this amber within someone who's listening.
do not stop what you are doing. Keep going, keep pushing. The correct opportunity will come along. There are programs that provide funding, such as JGF, which makes it easier for you to get into these spaces. If you feel that you want to teach and it's a burning passion, you must not ignore it, because it's there for a reason.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Rudi. We really appreciate you making the time to join us on this here podcast, sharing your life's experience and the wisdom embedded in all of the glory of your journey.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so very much. Good people, you know what to do if you want to be a part of this movement, I dare say. You just need to go onto your favorite search engine, type in the JGF Fellowship, and any and everything that you need to know to partner, to help, to spread the good news, if you will. Everything is on there. And yes, we will see you in our next episode of JGF Amplified, the humans of JGF, with the Christmas or holiday rather special. I'm Matawutladi. See you on the other side of this. Bye.
Don't forget to like, comment, and share.
Oh, please. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Cheers.